Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. The Red-Headed League. Chapter 1. It was a day in autumn when I decided to visit my friend, Sherlock Holmes, at our old place in Baker Street. Since I got married, we didn't see each other much. He was often busy with a case, and I was busy with my medical work. Even though I was happy with Mary, I missed the exciting times with Holmes. He often forgot to eat when he was working, so I knew he wouldn't remember to stay in touch. The only way to know what he was doing was to visit him. When I went into the study we used to share, I was surprised to see how clean it was. Mrs. Hudson must have been taking care of him because I couldn't imagine Holmes thinking it was important to keep his place clean. He was talking to a big, old man with bright red hair. I said sorry for interrupting and was going to leave, but Holmes brought me into the room and closed the door.
"You couldn't have come at a better time, my dear Watson,"
he said warmly. Then he introduced me to the man.
"Mr. Wilson, this is Dr. Watson. He has helped me in many successful cases, and I am sure he will be very helpful in yours too."
The big man stood up a little and nodded his head to say hello. He looked at me quickly but seemed to feel better after Holmes introduced me, and he sat down again. I sat on the sofa and waited to hear the mystery that Mr. Wilson brought to Holmes. Holmes put his fingertips together, which he often did when he was thinking deeply.
Are you enjoying this story? Let us know by tapping the like button. Thank you.
"I know, my dear Watson, that you like the unusual events that happen outside the normal everyday life. You have shown that you like strange things by being so keen to write down many of my little adventures."
Your cases have always been very interesting to me, I said sincerely.
"Do you remember that I said the other day that real life is often stranger than anything we can imagine?"
And did I doubt it?
"You did, Doctor, but still, you must agree with me. Otherwise, I will keep telling you facts until you have to agree that I am right. Now, Mr. Jabez Wilson has been kind enough to visit me this morning and start a story that seems to be one of the strangest I have heard for a long time. You have heard me say that the strangest and most special things are often connected to small crimes. Sometimes it is not clear if a crime has happened at all.
As far as I have heard, it is hard to say if the current case is a crime or not.
Perhaps, Mr. Wilson, you would be so kind as to tell your story again. I ask not only because my friend, Dr. Watson, has not heard it, but because it is so strange that I want to hear every detail again. I can usually guide myself by thinking of thousands of other similar cases, but the facts in this case seem to be special."
The big client puffed out his chest proudly and took out a dirty and wrinkled newspaper from his coat. As he looked down at it, with his head forward and the paper on his knee, I took a good look at the man and tried, as Holmes would do, to understand Mr. Wilson's character by looking at him. I didn't learn much, however. Our visitor looked like a normal British shopkeeper.
Don't miss a single chapter of our extraordinary stories. Hit the subscribe button now.
He wore rather loose grey check trousers, a not very clean black coat, unbuttoned at the front, and a dull waistcoat with a chain and a square piece of metal with holes as decoration. A worn top hat and a faded brown overcoat with a wrinkled velvet collar were on a chair beside him. Altogether, there was nothing special about the man except for his bright red hair and the very annoyed expression on his face. Holmes saw what I was doing and he shook his head with a smile. Apart from the clear facts that he has done physical work, is a Freemason, has been to China, and has done a lot of writing recently, I can deduce nothing else. Chapter 2. Mr. Jabez Wilson was sitting in his chair, his finger on the newspaper but his eyes on Holmes.
"How did you know all that, Mr. Holmes?"
he asked.
"How did you know I did manual labor and that I was a ship's carpenter?"
"Your hands, Sir, your right hand is much larger than your left. It shows you worked with it and the muscles are bigger.
And the Freemasonry?
You wear an arc and compass pin against the rules of your order.
And the writing?
The right cuff of your shirt is very shiny and the left one has a small patch where you rested on the desk.
And China?
The fish tattoo on your right wrist could only be done in China. I have studied tattoos and written about them. The pink scales of the fish are a Chinese speciality. Also, I noticed the Chinese coin on your watch chain.
Mr. Wilson laughed.
I thought you were clever, but now I see it's simple.
Holmes frowned.
I think I make a mistake explaining things. It's bad for my reputation. Mr. Wilson, can you find the advertisement?
Yes, here it is.
He said, pointing to a column in the newspaper.
You must read it yourself.
I took the paper and read. Red-Headed League needs a new member for minor tasks. Salary, £4 a week. All red-headed, healthy men of 21 considered. Apply Monday, 11 a.m. to Duncan Ross, 7 Pope's Court, Fleet Street. What does this mean? I asked after reading it twice. Holmes smiled.
It's unusual, isn't it? Now, Mr. Wilson, tell us about yourself, your household, and how this advertisement affected you. Doctor, note the paper and date.
It's the Morning Chronicle, July 27th, 1890, 2 months ago.
Good. Continue, Mr. Wilson.
Well, as I told you, Mr. Holmes, I have a small pawnbroker's business in Saxe-Coburg Square, near the city. It's not big and recently only gives me a living. I had 2 assistants, but now only 1. I would struggle to pay him, but he comes for half wages to learn the business.
What's his name?
Vincent Spaulding. He's not young. I couldn't ask for a smarter assistant, Mr. Holmes. He could earn twice what I'd give him. But he's satisfied, so why give him ideas?
Indeed. You are lucky to have an employee who works for less than market price. It's not common. Your assistant seems as remarkable as your advertisement.
I agreed. Few employers were so lucky to have an assistant who worked for so little.
He has faults,
Said Mr. Wilson.
He loves photography too much. He takes photos when he should be working, then goes to the cellar to develop them. But overall, he's a good worker with no vices.
He still works for you?
Yes. He and a 14-year-old girl who cooks and cleans. My wife died many years ago and we had no children. We live quietly, pay our debts, and that's the advertisement caused this problem. 8 weeks ago, Spaulding came to the office with this paper and said, "I wish I was a red-headed man." Why?
I asked.
There's another vacancy in the League of the Red-Headed Men. It's worth a lot to anyone who gets it. There are more jobs than men. If my head changed color, I could get this nice little job.
Wilson looked at Holmes.
You see, Mr. Holmes, I don't go out much. Customers come to me. I run my business from home and often don't go out for weeks. I don't know much news. So, I asked Spaulding about the League. "You've never heard of the League of Red-Headed Men?" he asked. I said no, and he was shocked. But as I said, I often miss the news. You could get one of their vacancies, he said. I asked how much it paid, and he said a few £100 a year. The work was simple and wouldn't affect my other job. I was interested because business had been slow for years.
Mr. Wilson stopped and looked at Holmes and me for agreement or sympathy. Holmes nodded.
Please continue.
Wilson coughed and remembered the conversation.
I asked Spaulding about the League. Well, he said, the League was started by an American millionaire, Ezekiel Hopkins. He was red-headed and wanted to help red-headed men. When he died, he left his fortune to trustees to help red-headed men. There would be millions of red-headed men who would apply, I said. Not as many as you think, Spaulding said. The work is only for Londoners and adults. Hopkins was born in London and wanted to help the town. Also, you can't apply if your hair is not bright, blazing, fiery red. You would easily get the job, Mr. Wilson, but maybe it's not worth it for a few £100.
Chapter 3.
Now, gentlemen,
Wilson continued,
as you can see, my hair is the same color Spaulding mentioned, so I believed I had a good chance. I thought Spaulding could be helpful, so I told him to close the shop and come with me. He was happy for a day off, so we went to the address in the advert. I couldn't believe my eyes. Mr. Holmes. Every man with a bit of red in his hair had replied to the advert. I didn't think there were so many redheads in the country. Seeing the crowd, I almost gave up, but Spaulding encouraged me. Somehow, he got us through the crowd and up the stairs to the office. There were lots of people on the stairs, some going up, hopeful, and others coming down, rejected. Soon, we were in the office.
Your story is interesting so far.
Holmes said, making notes.
The office had a few wooden chairs and a table. A man with very red hair sat behind it. He spoke to each person, always finding a reason to reject them. It seemed the job was not so easy to get. However, he was much friendlier to me. He even closed the door for a private chat. My assistant introduced me. This is Mr. Jabez Wilson. He is interested in the league vacancy. The interviewer replied, he is perfect for it. I haven't seen anything so good in a while. He stepped back, looked at my hair until I felt uncomfortable, then suddenly shook my hand and congratulated me. I am sure you understand the need for caution, he said, pulling my hair until it hurt. We must be careful. We have been deceived before. He opened the window and announced the vacancy was filled. A disappointed noise rose from below, and everyone left until only the manager and I remained. My name is Mr. Duncan Ross. I am a trustee of the Ezekiel Hopkins Fund. When can you start? It's difficult, I replied. I already have a business. Don't worry, interrupted Vincent Spaulding. I can manage it. What are the working hours? I asked. 10 until 2. As a pawnbroker, I am busy in the evenings, Mr. Holmes, especially on Thursdays and Fridays. So, mornings suit me. Also, I trusted my assistant. So, I agreed to the hours and asked about the salary. £4 a week. And the work? Simple. However, there is one rule. Don't leave the building. If you do, you lose your job forever. It's only 4 hours a day. I won't leave, I said. No excuses, said Mr. Duncan Ross. Not illness, business, or anything. And the work? Copy the Encyclopedia Britannica. The first volume is there. Bring your own ink, pens, and blotting paper. We provide the table and chair. Can you start tomorrow? Certainly, I replied. Goodbye, Mr. Jabez Wilson. Congratulations on your important new job. He showed me out, and I went home with my assistant, feeling very happy. However, as the day went on, I started to feel down. By evening, I thought it must be a joke or a scam. It seemed unbelievable that anyone would create such a will or pay so much for copying the Encyclopedia Britannica. Vincent Spaulding tried to cheer me up, but by bedtime, I had dismissed the whole thing.
Wilson took a break again. I could understand his confusion. Everything seemed pointless. I looked at Holmes but couldn't understand his expression. He had been quiet during the story, seeming lost in thought, but I knew he was listening carefully. Mr. Wilson went on.
In the morning, I decided to check it out. I bought a small bottle of ink, a small pen, and 7 sheets of paper. Then I went to Pope's Court. To my surprise, everything was perfect. The table was ready, and Mr. Duncan Ross made sure I started working. He got me started on the letter A and then left. He checked on me occasionally. At 2 o'clock, he wished me a good day, complimented my work, and locked the office door. This happened every day, Mr. Holmes. On Saturday, the manager gave me 4 gold coins for my work. This happened for the next 2 weeks. I arrived at 10 and left at 2 every day. Slowly, Mr. Duncan Ross started visiting only once in the morning, and then stopped coming. However, I never left the room as I wasn't sure when he might return. The job was good and suited me, so I didn't want to risk losing it. After 8 weeks, I had written about abbots, archery, armor, architecture, and Attica. I hoped to start on the B soon. It cost me a lot in paper and I had nearly filled a shelf with my work. Then everything suddenly stopped.
Stopped.
Yes, sir. Just this morning. I went to work at 10, but the door was locked. There was a piece of cardboard on it. Here it is. Read it yourself.
He showed us a piece of white cardboard. The red-headed league is dissolved. October 9th, 1890. Holmes and I looked at the note and Wilson's sad face, and we both started laughing loudly. Chapter 4.
I don't see what's funny,
said our client, his face turning as red as his hair.
If you're just going to laugh at me, I'll go elsewhere.
No,
Cried Holmes, urging him back into the chair.
I wouldn't miss your case for anything. It's unusually interesting. But if you don't mind me saying, there is something a bit funny about it. What did you do when you found the notice on the door?
Mr. Wilson explained how confused he was and the efforts he made to find out what had happened. He had asked people in the nearby offices, visited the landlord, and even went to a new address he was given. However, this address turned out to be a factory that made artificial kneecaps. No one there had heard of Mr. William Morris or Mr. Duncan Ross. Mr. Wilson was obviously distressed by the whole situation. He had even asked his assistant for advice, but he couldn't help. Mr. Wilson felt desperate and didn't want to lose his good job without trying to understand what happened. So, he decided to ask Holmes for help. Holmes said the situation was serious even though it was strange. He promised Mr. Wilson that he would look into it. Holmes asked Mr. Wilson many questions about his assistant, Vincent Spaulding. Spaulding had been working for him for about a month before he started with the lead. Mr. Wilson chose Spaulding from 12 applicants because he could start immediately and didn't ask for much money. He said Spaulding was small and stout. He moved very quickly and had a white mark on his forehead from acid. Holmes was very interested in Spaulding's appearance. He was excited to learn that Spaulding had pierced ears. After learning that Spaulding was still working for Mr. Wilson and looking after the business while he was away, Holmes thought deeply. After getting all the information he needed, Holmes promised Mr. Wilson that he would give his opinion in a day or two. After Mr. Wilson left, Holmes and I talked about the case. I found it very mysterious and couldn't understand it at all. Holmes, however, said that strange cases usually turned out to be less mysterious. He said ordinary crimes were really difficult to solve. He then decided to take a break from the case and suggested we go to a violin concert at St. James's Hall. The famous violinist, Sarasate, was performing. I had nothing planned for the day, so I agreed to go with him. I felt happy about spending a pleasant afternoon with Holmes, although I was surprised he wanted my company. He usually liked being alone. We took the underground to Aldersgate and walked to Saxe Coburg Square, the place mentioned in the strange story we heard in the morning. It was a run-down area with 4 rows of shabby 2-story brick houses surrounding a small square with overgrown grass and some withered bushes. A sign with Jabez Wilson on a corner building indicated our client's business. Holmes examined the surroundings carefully, his eyes sparkling. He walked up and down the street, knocked his stick on the ground, which confused me, and then knocked on the door. A clean-shaven young man quickly opened it. Holmes asked,
How would you go from here to the Strand?
3rd right, 4th left.
The assistant answered promptly, closing the door.
Smart fellow.
Holmes commented as we left. You think Mr. Wilson's assistant is key to this mystery? You asked for directions just to see him, I said.
Not him.
What, then?
His trouser knees.
And?
What I expected. My dear doctor, it's a time for observation, not talk. We are spies in enemy territory. We know something about Saxe-Coburg Square. Now let's explore its surroundings.
I wished I knew what to observe, but I didn't question Holmes. We turned a corner onto a busy main road filled with vehicles and pedestrians. It was hard to believe that this bustling street with fine shops was connected to the bleak square we left behind. Holmes noted the order of the buildings at the corner, mentioning it was his hobby to know London well. He listed the shops and then declared it was time for leisure. We had a sandwich and coffee before going to a violin concert, which made Holmes, a skilled violinist and composer, very happy. Sitting in the stalls, he waved his fingers in time with the music, a gentle smile on his face. It was a different side of the sharp-minded detective I knew. I was amazed at how he could enjoy leisure yet be so driven and precise in his work. His love for music was as strong as his dedication to his work. Watching him engrossed in the music, I sensed that trouble was coming for those he was tracking down. After the concert, Holmes said he had business to attend to and needed my help later that night. He said a significant crime was being planned, and he believed we could prevent it. However, it being Saturday complicated things. He asked me to meet him at Baker Street at 10. We parted ways, and he disappeared into the crowd. Although I wasn't denser than the average person, I often felt foolish around Sherlock Holmes. I had the same information as him, yet he not only understood what had happened but also what was about to happen. I was still clueless about the mystery. Chapter 5. On my way home to Kensington, I couldn't stop thinking about everything that had happened that day, from the peculiar story of the red-haired man who was copying the Encyclopedia Britannica, to our visit to Saxe-Coburg Square, and the mysterious words Holmes said before leaving. I was very curious about our night adventure. What could Holmes be planning? I wondered. I knew the man we were going to face was clever and dangerous, but I couldn't figure out the whole plan. I decided to stop thinking about it and wait for the night. I left my house at 9:15 and crossed Hyde Park to get to Baker Street. When I arrived, there were 2 cabs waiting outside and I could hear people talking upstairs. In Holmes' room, I met 2 men. One was Athelney Jones, a detective from Scotland Yard, and the other was a tall, thin man with a sad face, wearing a shiny top hat and a formal coat. Holmes introduced him as Mr. Merriweather, our companion for the night. Mr. Merriweather seemed unhappy about the situation, as he was missing his regular game of bridge. I confess, I miss my game of bridge. It's the first Saturday night in 37 years that I haven't had my game, he said with a sigh. However, Holmes assured him that the night's adventure would be more thrilling than any card game. He explained that we were going after John Clay, a notorious criminal. Mr. Jones praised Holmes' abilities, although he mentioned that his methods were sometimes too imaginative. Holmes explained that the stakes for the night were high. For Mr. Merriweather, it was £30,000, and for Mr. Jones, It was capturing the criminal he was after. They talked about John Clay's background and criminal activities, mentioning that despite being well-educated and coming from a noble family, he had chosen a life of crime. Holmes announced that it was time to leave.
It is past 10, and quite time that we started out. If you two will take the first hansom cab, Watson and I will follow in the second,
He said. We took 2 cabs to reach our destination. During the ride, Holmes was quiet and seemed lost in his thoughts. When we arrived, Mr. Merriweather guided us through a narrow passage and a side door, which led to a dark corridor and then to a huge vault in the bank cellar. Holmes examined the room carefully and then explained our plan. We would hide in the dark until the robbers came, then catch them by surprise. We waited in complete darkness, listening carefully for any sounds. After a while, Holmes whispered that the only way out for the robbers was through the house into Saxe-Coburg Square. He asked Mr. Jones if he had placed the police officers at the front door as instructed, and Mr. Jones confirmed. The wait felt endless, although it was only an hour and 15 minutes. I was exhausted and tried to stay still to avoid making any noise. My nerves were on edge, and my hearing was so sharp that I could distinguish between the deep breaths of Jones and the faint sighs of the bank director. Suddenly, I noticed a glint of light. It started as a faint twinkle on the stone floor, then stretched into a yellow line, and suddenly expanded and seemed to open, revealing a hand. This pale hand groped around the lighted area for a minute or more before withdrawing, leaving only a single spot between the stones. The hand disappeared for a short time, then with a tearing sound, a white stone flipped on its side, revealing a square hole illuminated by a lantern. A young face with clean features appeared over the edge. The person looked around, then pulled himself up until one knee rested on the edge. In a moment, he stood beside the hole, putting up a companion with a pale face and bright red hair.
All clear.
He whispered.
Got the chisel and bags?
Great Scott. Jump, Archie.
Sherlock Holmes suddenly stood up, grabbed the intruder by the collar, while the other one dived into the hole. I heard fabric tearing as Jones grabbed at his clothes. The light reflected off a revolver, but Holmes hit the man's wrist with his hunting crop, causing the gun to clatter on the stone floor.
It's useless, John Clay,
said Holmes.
You have no chance.
So it seems.
The other replied calmly.
I believe my friend is fine, although you've got his coattails.
3 men are waiting for him at the door,
Holmes informed.
Indeed. You seem to have covered everything. Well done.
and you,
Holmes responded.
your red-headed plan was new and effective.
I looked at Jones and Mr. Merriweather, wondering if they were as confused by Holmes and Clay's conversation as I was. As the bank manager and I watched, Jones struggled with a pair of handcuffs.
"You'll see your friend soon.
He told Clay.
He's faster at climbing down holes than I am. Please extend your hands for these handcuffs."
Please don't touch me with your dirty hands.
The prisoner requested as the handcuffs climbed on his wrists.
You may not know, but I have royal blood. Please call me sir and please.
"Fine.
Jones replied, smirking.
Would you kindly, sir, go upstairs where a cab will take you to the police station?"
Much better.
John Clay said calmly. He gracefully bowed to us and calmly left with the detective. The sudden end made me appreciate Jones's sarcasm, and I smiled.
Mr. Holmes,
Mr. Merriweather said as we ascended from the cellar.
I don't know how the bank can thank you or repay you. You undoubtedly stopped one of the most determined bank robbery attempts I've ever encountered.
I had some unsettled business with Mr. John Clay.
Holmes explained. I had some expenses during my investigation, which I expect the bank to pay back, but other than that, I consider myself compensated. I had a unique experience and learned the fascinating tale of the Red-Headed League. Chapter 6. As we sipped tea in Baker Street, Holmes explained,
Watson, it was clear to me that the advertisement and the encyclopedia copying task were meant to keep Mr. Wilson occupied for a few hours daily. It was an odd approach, but hard to improve upon. The idea probably came from the color of his accomplice's hair. The weekly £4 was a bait to attract their prey, but it was nothing compared to the thousands they aimed for.
I sensed a tone of admiration in Holmes' voice, which explained his courteousness towards Clay during the capture. Holmes was never shy of criticizing, but he always recognized brilliance in others. I too found Clay's plan quite ingenious. Holmes went on.
They placed the advertisement. One criminal had the temporary office, the other persuaded Mr. Wilson to apply, and together they ensured his absence every weekday morning. Once I learned that the assistant was hired for half the salary, it was clear he had a strong reason to secure the position.
But how did you deduce the motive?
Mr. Wilson's business was small, and there was nothing in his house worth the elaborate preparations and expenses. It had to be something outside the house. I recalled the assistant's passion for photography and his frequent disappearances into the cellar. He was doing something there that took many hours daily for several months. The only possibility was that he was digging a tunnel to another building.
I nodded. It made perfect sense in retrospect. Holmes continued.
During our visit, I surprised you by tapping the pavement with my stick to check if the cellar extended in front or behind. It wasn't in front. Then I rang the bell and, luckily, the assistant answered. Although we had clashed before, we had never seen each other. I barely glanced at his face. I wanted to see his knees. The wear, wrinkles, and stains indicated long hours of digging. The remaining question was the purpose of the tunnel. I walked around the corner, saw the city and suburban bank adjacent to our friend's premises, and concluded my investigation. After you left post-concert, I visited Scotland Yard and the bank director's chairman, which led to the outcome you witnessed.
But how did you know they would act tonight?
When they shut down their league offices, it indicated they didn't need Mr. Jabez Wilson at the pawn shop anymore, meaning the tunnel was complete. It was crucial to use it soon to avoid detection of the gold being moved. And Saturday was the most convenient day, as it provided 2 days for the robbery and escape. For all these reasons, I anticipated their move tonight.
I can't find any flaws in your logic, I admired. It's a long chain, yet every link is sound.
It prevented my boredom,
He replied, yawning.
Sadly, I already feel it creeping back. I continuously strive to escape life's monotony. These small challenges help.
And in the process, you assist others with their issues. He shrugged.
Well, maybe I'm somewhat useful after all.
The end. Have you enjoyed this story? Like and subscribe to our channel now to unlock fresh tales and level up your English skills.